Hi, my name is Maysey Craddock, and I'm one of the two artists in this summer's artist residency program at Peninsula School of Art. Thrilled to have been there. I miss it already. And first, I do want to thank everybody for offering this amazing program to artists to come experience place and the beautiful nature and scenery of Peninsula State Park. I am an artist in Memphis. I'm based in Memphis. I travel a lot down to the Gulf Coast as well, of like Alabama and Louisiana. And you can see this picture of me in my studio in Memphis, which is in a old warehouse building with many other artists. I've been here for about 15 years, and it's a great place to work. That's my office setup right there. Most of my work is gouache on paper, and I'm working from photography that I'm taking myself in the landscape. And these are all painted on paper bags. These are just ordinary paper grocery sacks that I'm stitching together to create a substrate. And there's something about this straddling the line between painting and sculpture that I really love. The idea of repurposing and reusing something that is traditionally discarded or ignored or taken for granted. And then there's this history and terrain of the paper that I feel like adds so much to the imagery that I'm using. You can see this image in particular. It's called Cloud Meander, and it's about 47 by 62 inches. And I love how the bags kind of create this idea of fragmentation in the image. And that is a concept that I'm very, very interested in terms of how we use and divide and parse out nature. So most of my imagery has come from the Gulf Coast. I've been going there my entire life. I lived in New Orleans for many, many years, and I tend to revisit places over time. And I'm interested in how that changes, how these specific trees change over time, how these landscapes deal with natural threats such as storms and also man-made threats such as development, pollution, and especially habitat loss due to encroachment. Ideas of ephemerality, entropy, and then in my work, I really believe that bringing forth a sense of beauty and resilience is a way to connect with the viewer. So this is an example of an image that I'm working on now, and I'll take the photograph. Sometimes it takes years to understand what I want to do with it, but I will kind of fool around with it on the computer to take out information and take the image away from the reality of the photograph. So I'm just trying to kind of push it into dream, sort of dreamscape of that place. And once I've got the idea pretty much set, you can see that smaller image on the right. I'll print that out large in black and white and lay that down on my table and create a tracing paper kind of line drawing from it. So the first step of drawing is quite intricate, and actually all the drawing is quite intricate and very labor intensive. Then I'll have the line drawing, which you can see on the left, which is being transferred onto the bags with carbon paper. So it's like a printmaking technique, basically. And you can see a used piece of carbon paper on the right and that line drawing kind of coming through in the surface of the paper. All of this drawing gives me time to really think about place and think about the image and think about the mood and the atmosphere that I'm interested in evoking. On these two images, it's just an idea of how the bags are sewn together. I'm using silk thread because it's very pliable, strong, and it also takes the paint. So I don't mind that they're visible, but I don't want them to really stand out too much. And this bag in particular is made up of many pieces of scraps and edges that had been torn off from when I was sewing larger pieces together. So I pretty much save everything and eventually find a use for it. I mean, then I did want to pull up these three images. These are in the show that's going up this week. These are all fairly small, but good examples of the gouache on paper work that I do here in Memphis. And on the left, we've got In the Night Garden. In the middle, A Current Passes Through Us. And on the right, A River I Loved. So as one of the artists in residence this summer, I was invited to come make work in a place that I've never been to. And to really find a way to visually respond to something that for me was completely unknown. I've never spent time in the Midwest besides the city of Chicago. So knowing that I was going to something that was completely different and new for me, a different flora and fauna, a different history, different culture. I spent about 6 months really kind of thinking about how I would approach it because I knew I wouldn't have a whole lot of time once I was there. So I just came with a few questions. Who are we when we enter landscape, and what does subjective memory bring to our perception and understanding of it? So, this specifically was like, what am I bringing to my experience of this landscape? And how does our engagement with place embody memory and experience? And then what does it mean for an artist to respond to something like this in such a short chapter of time? For me, a way, I really feel like entering a place through deep time and geological history, natural history is a way for me to kind of understand what I'm looking at in a more nuanced way than just taking a snapshot as a tourist. So I spent some time over the spring really kind of doing some research about where I was going, what the history of it is, over eons. And I really kind of fell in love with this idea that it was on the western edge of the Niagara Escarpment and had this like very visible evidence of what was once a completely different world. And on the way, I've discovered that there's a wonderful map collection at the University of Milwaukee, so we stopped there. On the first day, I really was honestly quite overwhelmed. I didn't know how to go into the park or where to go. So I went to the beach and just basically got down in the minutia and really spent probably several hours just looking at rocks and what was in them and crawling around under them and letting myself just lose my kind of sense of place and perspective in the moment. And it was just fun. It was very playful, made a lot of photographs and videos just for myself. We also took a wonderful hike on Eel Trail, and that was kind of where everything sort of settled into place for me. It had wonderful visual evidence of kind of how the escarpment is kind of straddling the park and shifting the landscape and all of these trees and ferns and roots clinging to this geological edge. And I really found my muse on that hike in the ferns that were clinging to these kind of rocky cliffs. So in the studio, I just also kind of came with the intention of letting go of my normal process, which would have been unachievable at any rate because it's so labor intensive, and to bring a different kind of sense of gesture and play to the work that I was going to do in there. I knew that I would be able to go into the park every day and divide my time between actual making and experiencing the landscape. So, the time in the studio is less than what I would usually have. And I just wanted it to be fluid and mobile and really just be able to respond to things as they came. So I did a lot of kind of playing around with just literally like letting the ink fall around the paper. I picked up a few things, a branch, and painted that. You'll see that later on. And the studio is so gorgeous and giant. It gave me a way to set up stations kind of around the studio, and when I didn't know how to move forward with something, I could just move to the next thing and just keep kind of moving around the studio and letting ideas sort of coalesce and emerge. This is a sort of gestural ink painting that became something later on that you'll see that's in the show. I, again, back to the ferns, I kind of fixated on a couple of images and played around with them on my computer and played with repetition and different iterations of the image and how color can change a sense of what the image is. And on the left here, you see it's very hard to see, but what I'm doing is I'm projecting the image on a piece of tracing paper to see if I can just make a loose drawing from it. These are two examples of the sculptural pieces that I did just right at the beginning. It was a way for me to just have this quick response to the materiality that I found in the park. Birch bark is everywhere, and I know it's like people use it for all kinds of things. And I just wanted to merge what I was seeing in the park with what I was seeing on the surface of this bark. So you can see some kind of tiny blue lines on there. That is a paint called Flash, which is a very deep ultramarine vinyl-based paint. And I've just kind of played around with the idea of water and waves reflecting on the surface of the bark. And then on the right, there's the branch is painted also this very, very deep ultramarine, and it's adhered to a piece of driftwood, sort of as a improvisational arrangement. One of the first kind of involved pieces I did when I was there was this iteration of this fern, and the piece on the left is on Yupo paper, and it's ink and watercolor. And here I'm trying to understand how to look at this very expressive fern that I found. The image on the right is me just inverting the color so that I could kind of see what I was looking at. And then it became this painting, which is about 40 by 59 inches. And this is, I started with a projection, and you can see sort of a lighter orange color underneath this purpley form. And the orange color was me very, very, very loosely putting a wash on behind the image on the projector. And then I kind of freehanded the drawing, which was a little out of my comfort zone, but it was really good for me to do. And it was really fun to work this big and this fast and on a paper that is kind of different from what I normally use. And also in the show on the left is another large piece. It's 59 by 40 inches, and it's a version of this smaller fern and has that kind of gestural shadow painting underneath that I felt like I love that kind of collision between something that is super intricate and tight and detailed with something that is loose and has almost no direction and is it's almost like kind of the primordial form of this fern. I mean, in general, I couldn't be more grateful for the time that I spent there. As an artist, it was challenging in ways that I didn't anticipate. It was revelatory in ways that I wish I had anticipated. I think, coming away from it, I feel like I learned that I can have a little bit more faith in myself, that I can do something new in such a short period of time, and not only something new, but something that I want to take forward into my work into the future. And that was a really, really wonderful takeaway for me. I think also it just deepens my ideas about how we see nature, how we commodify nature for extraction, for commercial purposes, for development, And then in the case of something like Peninsula State Park, we commodify nature for obviously preservation, which is a good thing, but also our own recreational enjoyment. And I think it's really important for us to understand all those different aspects of how we see, and to be able to go into a space and try to let go of that a little bit and let these images speak to us and tell us what they see. So that's kind of what I'm coming away with. I hope you all have a wonderful summer, and thank you, Alicia, and everyone at Peninsula State Park for the invitation and the wonderful experience.